Just talk about that.
Mr. Michael Biehn. You know, everybody has their favorite Michael Biehn character, obviously, and I see a few Aliens shirts, and obviously we see the name of the panel here today is Come With Me If You Want to Live. Me, I'm more of a Douglas Breen guy myself, which I think is a great way to kind of jump into this Q&A. Again, this man has evolved as an artist and worked all over the world. In fact, I think you just came back from England, right?
Yes. Yes.
Are you allowed to talk about that? Yeah.
There's a new show that they're making, and it's going to be, you know, these days it's kind of hard to tell, and you know, but I think it'll be like one of these 8-hour kind of like, and it's called Curfew, and I got sent to, I don't really work that much anymore. I have a 5-year-old, 3-year-old boy at home. And I kind of missed the other ones growing up a lot because I was on locations. They never shoot anything in LA anymore, hardly. But this gave me a chance to for the companies to pay for all the stuff to go over to England and stuff. So I went over and I did this show called Curfew. And when I walked onto the set, you can tell as an actor, I mean, it was like this, like, it was like 80 cars, like all like in circles, you know, all revving their engines, and guys doing wheelies on their motorcycles, and another car that pulls in and does like 360 or whatever, and like 100 extras. And that, you know, is a very, very big production. And it's kind of a road warrior type of show, and with
It's a great cast. You got Billy Zane is in it, isn't he? Or
well, the neat thing about it is that I got a chance to meet Sean Bean, who all throughout all the years I've never had a chance to meet him before, and so that was nice.
Not yet, hopefully.
And Billy, who I've worked with before, of course, in Tombstone, and his wife was in Tombstone, and actually Billy and I did another movie together. I can't think of the name of it. It'll come to me. I'm getting old.
And now Tombstone, Johnny Ringo, of course, another great performance. But let's get back to Douglas Breen, because you know, that was kind of my, I guess Aliens was my entry point, but as a lover of horror, like real serious psychological horror, I'm a huge fan of The Fan, and you're so goddamn good in that. And what's amazing about that role is that you're basically a baby in it. You're so young. This is like your first major role, and it was a starring role up against one of the greatest Hollywood legends of all time, Lauren Bacall. And I know you had done Logan's Run, the TV show, a little bit there. You're sort of in Grease, just as a little kind of a cameo in Grease, a smaller role. And yet suddenly in 1981, you end up in Edward's movie, and you got this major role. I just want to know how you made that journey. It seems instant, the optics, but I'm sure there was a bit of a story of how you got that role.
Well, I didn't, you know, to tell you the truth, I mean, I went in there and, you know, I just auditioned for them, and I was auditioning for the part that Lorenzo Lamas played. Lorenzo Lamas was the boy that Olivia Newton-John was dating to make John Travolta jealous there for a while. And I went over to Paramount about 3 times or 4 times to try to play that role, and they gave it to Lorenzo Lamas, and I think that they just kind of felt sorry for me, and they gave me a day's work as an actor, not an extra, but as an actor, and you'll see if you watch that movie. There's a scene where John Travolta's trying to impress his girl that you know, he can play sports. And there's a scene where he's playing basketball, and I've got the basketball in my hand, and I'm going back and forth with it, and he punches me in the stomach, and gets the ball. And, you know,
Do you remember
of
that scene?
course, I forget his name. It was like, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. But there's another really, really clear shot of me. I was basically an extra. You know, I didn't speak or anything in it. I'm not billed in it. But they paid me as an actor. And, but there's a scene where Kaneki, and I mean, comes into the classroom and he's got a frog, and he throws the frog up and everybody goes crazy and it's a big deal. But the start of that shot is a tracking shot of a girl sitting in the front chair, and then it tracks across to me, and it's just a full screen headshot, whatever, of me looking about 12.
That must have been a huge deal for you as a young actor. Did you bring the whole family out to the theater and then wait for that moment when?
No, to tell you the truth, I mean, I didn't know LA that very well, and I got lost, and you know, by the time I got there, they were like, where have you been, man? You know, we're shooting your scene, and they just like threw me into. I had done quite a bit of work before Grease, and I think I did like the Hill Street Blue. I think if you look at my IMDb page, there's probably 10 or 15 credits, and so you know, when you can get work, you can get work, you know.
But I mean, almost immediately after that, and whether you're holding a basketball or not, suddenly you're a psycho killer in The Fan. So I mean, how did you get that role? Like, it was almost like it was only a year after that you. That's a big jump from holding a basketball to bouncing off Lauren Bacall.
Well, you know, I went in and I auditioned for it, and Ed Bianchi was directing it. He had done a series of commercials for Dr. Pepper, and this guy, I forget his name also, was dancing around New York City.
Was it David Naughton, was it?
David
yeah,
Naughton,
from American Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were very good commercials. So there was a guy named Waris Hussein who was supposed to direct that movie, and it was more of a psychological thriller based on a book. And Brian De Palma made a movie called Dressed to Kill. It came out about a month before we did The Fan, and Dressed to Kill just killed at the box office. So Randall Kleiser, who's the director, and it was probably not his choice or whatever. Oh no,
Randall was Grease. Ed Bianchi.
Ed Bianchi, who had done those commercials, he got tapped to do. He was supposed to do Staying Alive, which was the second.
It's a terrible movie. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I just went and read for it, and they liked me, I think, because I was so. You know, I didn't look like a killer. I didn't look like a stalker. I looked exactly the opposite.
Yeah, you looked like a record salesman, which was what your characters. That's what you were in the movie, right? Yeah.
And so, anyway, I went back again and read, and you know, I got cast for the role, and I thought it was like the biggest thing, you know, and it was a big thing. It was like a big $30 million movie shot in New York City with Lauren Bacall and James Garner, and they had I forget his name, the cinematographer, Dick Hope, I think his name was. It was a big production, and I don't know, it's kind of a kitschy movie if you look at it now. It's not a very good movie, but right around the time that movie came out, John Lennon was shot, killed, and I think Reagan was shot, the Pope was shot. I mean, it was like kind of all within this short period of time. And if you did want to go see it, I think it was kind of a,
wrong time. Yeah.
Getting enough of that in real life kind of thing. But it's It's not a very good movie.
But there's great things in it outside of you. You know that you mentioned Dress to Kill. Do you know what the connection is outside of the competition there? But the connection between Dress to Kill and The Fan? Both have scores by Pino Donaggio. Both really, really good, opulent scores.
Yeah,
He did them both.
You really know your stuff.
I like,
You're
you know,
studying real hard.
I run a bunch of magazines. What can I do?
I didn't know that.
There you go. Has anyone seen The Fan? You should. Now we'll go on to other. I'm sure you want to talk a little bit about how James Cameron maybe he saw The Fan and maybe he was a fan. I don't know. How did you end up on James's radar? Very few years after that.
I went in and read for James, and James has told me since that he had seen The Fan, and he liked the fact that I was so innocuous, didn't look mean, didn't look like a bad guy or whatever, looked like a all-American boy, and then boom, man, turned into this killer.
Yeah.
And in The Fan, if you remember, for about the first 30 minutes of the movie until Tech Noir, you don't know who's the good guy and the bad guy.
Right.
Because I'm following her around, Arnold's doing his thing, but I'm always like, and she's checking over her shoulder, and I'm always following her. And I look pretty scruffy in that, that movie. And so he did see The Fan, and he kind of like flipped it on its side and said, okay, we'll make him look like the bad guy at the beginning of the movie, then Tech Noir, come with me if you want to live. From then on in, I'm the hero. Yeah.
It's funny too because by the time you get to the Terminator, you were much more of a star then. I mean, James was just still hanging out with Roger Corman. He had done one movie, I think, prior, Piranha 2, I think was his movie prior to this. He got fired off it, right? An Italian guy, Enzo Castellari or someone took it over. But so he was kind of an untried guy. This was a big deal for him, and you were already not a marquee name, but you were already a star, right?
Well, one of the questions that I get asked more than any other question was, when you made the Terminator, did you know that it was you were gonna be sitting 35 years later in front of an audience talking about it?
Yeah.
And I got sent the script, and I read the script, and it seemed kind of stupid. Guy comes back from the producer, and there's like a robot that's chasing her, and she works at Bob's Big Boy.
That was in the script, all right.
I said to my agent, okay, I've read it. It's okay. I was pretty hungry back then, too. I would have done just about anything. But and I liked the idea that the character was like this kind of like badass guy, but then he was like this sensitive guy, too, and I was in love with that. And I thought I could play that through a bad movie, and still come out like, oh, Michael did a pretty good job, in this piece of garbage. And so, yeah, Jim Cameron had been fired from
Piranha 2.
Yeah. And then Gail Hurd had also worked, she was the producer and has gone on to produce a lot of Jim's movies, and or a few of them. And so, at the time, you have to remember that, okay, so Cameron's never done anything, Gail's never done anything. Well, who's in it? Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, we all know Arnold Schwarzenegger now as this huge, huge movie star. Well, back in 1983, he wasn't, He could barely speak English. And the idea, I mean, my heroes back then were De Niro and Pacino and Dustin Hoffman and Jack Nicholson, and those are the people I wanted to work with, not Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I said, oh, okay, all right. Well, I went and met Jim again, and we went down to Stan Winston's studio, because I was a little bit on the, it sounded like such a ridiculous thing. you can imagine that movie in somebody else's hands other than Jim Cameron, and it just would have been terrible.
Yeah.
And so I went down with Jim and went down to Stan Winston's studio. He's no longer with us, but he went on to win like 7 Academy Awards for special effects.
Jurassic Park. And
Jurassic Park. And I went down there, man, and those guys were like serious. And I was like, now I was seeing the Terminator for the first time and how they were going to be using it. And you don't have to be around Jim Cameron very long to know how brilliant he is. And I knew that Jim was like really smart. So it got off, and Linda Hamilton is one of the sweetest women I've ever met. And I don't say that I mean, she just is, everybody that's ever met her will tell you that. And it was just great working with her. And the thing that people think about is the Terminator is like, okay, Terminator came out, it was this big hit. Well, it wasn't really that big of a hit. It was made for $6.5 million for Orion, and I forget the name of the other company. And
yeah, Carolco. Yeah. Who said?
No, Carolco came in afterwards. It was Hemdale.
Hemdale, that's right. Yeah.
Hemdale. And they made it for $6 million, and it made 40. So that's a pretty successful movie, you know. But that same year, the Terminator was not in the top 25 box office movies of the year. Karate Kid 2 made $90 million, you know.
Yeah.
And what happened was, about the time the Terminator came out was when VHSs, people started buying VHSs. And I think that the reason why that movie became so successful and they were able to make another one was because people watched it on VHS.
No, or on cable. I mean, I was 10 years old, and that's all, you know, all anybody talked about was the freaking Terminator. These little 10-year-olds walking around pretending they're Schwarzenegger, quoting all this stuff, punching people's guts, and I was like, oh my God, I gotta see this movie. Because they had seen it on cable.
You were 10 years old?
I was 10, yeah.
How old are you?
I'm 43, yeah.
You weren't 10 years old.
84? Yeah, I was born in 74. Yeah. Hold on, then we gotta get the It's all right. I think I was 10 years old.
Okay.
I always feel like I'm 10 years old, though, right? I mean, you love this stuff, you're 10 forever, right? So Terminator, not a big hit on the charts, but a big hit because it made dough, and then it became a cult hit.
Well, it also is, you know, you have to remember that, like, you know, who came out of that movie as the star?
Right.
Arnold came out of that movie as the star, even though he only had one line in the movie. And I was the one that had to tell Linda who she was and what her future was, who I was, and who the Terminator was, and basically that's telling the story. That's not just acting. That's like, you know, you have to have parts of the movie where you stop and explain to the audience what the movie's about. So I had all that to do. Jim was smart. He put that a lot in the car chases and when we were hiding from the Terminator and stuff. And, you know, that movie, like most, you know, remember Siskel and Ebert? 2 thumbs down.
Wow, did they?
Yeah.
Oh.
Any children in here?
I guess we can't speak ill of the dead, but...
Fuck them.
Sorry.
I'd be happy to speak to the dead, about the dead. And they're idiots.
You know what's funny about that is critics now, they really, and I am one sort of, but critics don't matter. Especially when it comes to this stuff, they don't matter at all. Today, Siskel and Ebert, and everyone would just be a blind eye to those guys. Back then, I guess it mattered, though.
The following year, 2 years later, Aliens came out, which is arguably one of the best science fiction movies ever made.
Best action movie, best war movie, best mother-daughter movie. I mean,
and that idiot gave it a thumbs down. And at least the heavyset guy, he was at least...
Yeah, Ebert likes this stuff a little bit.
he gave it a begrudging thumbs up, you know. So they took two movies that we're talking about 40 years later, and people are coming, and I'm signing autographs, and, you know, it just tells you never listen to your friend, you know, like, you know.
And if you're a critic, why?
I'll tell you another thing, too, is that if you go on RottenTomatoes.com, all right, which is supposed to be all the reviews that have ever been written, and it gives it 100%.
Yeah.
It did not get, you know, people didn't know any more than Siskel and Ebert that, you know, and so now somehow it's 100%. Everybody wrote that it was a great movie back then. And so it didn't cause, like, my career to go like, oh, Michael Biehn, he's so great in this movie, we'll offer him this and that. And actually, Jim didn't even cast me in Aliens, which was the next big movie he did 2 years later. I had read the movie, and I wanted to play Hicks. And he said, well, I've got somebody else in mind, Michael. And I was disappointed, but, you know, that's the way the business is. And so he cast a kid in it, and they went over to England, they did all the rehearsals, and then this kid was having some personal problems, you know, and it got into 2 days of shooting. His name is James Remar. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy, really, really good actor, but happened to be going through some stuff in his life at that point that the English government really didn't want him in the country. And so I was in Studio City, and of course I knew that they were over there shooting. And I was in Studio City, and Gail Hurd, who was married to Jim at the time, they were courting when we did Terminator. They were married when we did the Aliens, and they were divorced when we did the Abyss, you know. But they,
it's the,
you know,
it's the chart of a marriage over 3 films.
So I got a call, and Gail said, is your passport up to date, in order? And I said, yeah. And she said, you know, do you want to come over here and play Hicks? You know? And that was like, you know, you just won the lottery. So I went over there, and you could just tell right away. It's Pinewood Studios, like, massive sets, and like, you could just tell right away. And the thing about working on a movie is you never really know if it's going to be very good or very bad. And that one, because Jim had kind of proven himself with this low-budget movie, people were starting to catch on after 2 years of watching it on VCR that it was a really good movie, that this Aliens thing could be really good too. It had Stan Winston also involved in Aliens, and then they cast Paxton, Paxton was also in Terminator. Good friend. He introduced me to Jim, actually.
Yeah.
And so it was like, we were living in England at the time, and we were living in Chelsea, which is kind of the highbrow part of England, and the dollar was twice as strong as the pound, unlike now, it's like the opposite. And me and Bill, and they were shooting Full Metal Jacket there too. So me and Bill and Vince D'Onofrio, and I mean, we used to.
Oh man.
We used to tear up that town all night long.
Matthew Modine wasn't invited?
Matthew was married.
Oh, okay. Understood.
Matthew, when they shot that movie, I came over there, and they had already started Full Metal Jacket, and we started ours. And we made our movie. They cut the movie together. They released the movie in the theaters, and they were still shooting Full Metal Jacket.
Jeez, it's Kubrick. It's
from
on.
what I understand, I could be wrong, but from what I understand, Matthew Modine conceived and had a child on the movie.
Put the child in college, but you know, just back about Ebert. You know, just quickly, and we'll get on with this. But just, you know, he gave a bad review once. So if you're a critic, please be careful. He gave a bad review to a movie called The Brown Bunny once, which fair enough. And the director, was it Vincent Gallo? wished cancer upon him. I said, you know what, I hope you get cancer and die. A couple years later, he got cancer and died. So if you're a critic, be careful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyways, speaking of directors, because I'm sure the audience has questions for you, but let's jump ahead a little bit because, again, I always say I like people who've lived a lot of lives, and you now run a production company with your wife, Jennifer, as well as producing children, which congratulations about that. But you directed kind of directed one movie. I know there's a problem behind that one, which we can get into or don't. But The Victim is from stem to stern yours, and it was shot for, again, very little money. Presumably, all the different budgets you've worked with over the years, all the different great directors, not so great directors, you've learned how to make a movie and how not to make a movie. And The Victim's really, really good, considering you had very little resources. And you've never directed another one since, and that was like 4 or 5 years ago. Why haven't we seen any more Michael Biehn directorial gigs?
Well, first of all, I made that movie. Basically, there was a script that was sent to me like a few months ago, and they said, like, if you want to, work on the script, we might be able to find a director kind of thing. And I was like, this looks terrible. Kind of a Saw ripoff, but it was the first time the guy had ever written anything, so it didn't read like a script. It read kind of like a novel, but a script, and then a novel and a script. And I was like, nothing to do with that. Guy came to me, and he said to me, can I meet you in a coffee shop? I want to talk to you about a movie. And I said, sure. I'm not going to remember the guy's name, but Ryan Honey is his name. And he said, I've got $500,000, and I want to make a movie about, who did the, not Kirk Douglas, who did the circus act when he was younger?
Burt Lancaster?
Burt Lancaster, yeah. And he looked exactly like Burt Lancaster. And I said, okay, how much money do you have? And he said, $500,000. And I said, dude, there's no way you can make a period piece. I mean, the elephants alone will cost you, $20,000.
Yeah.
Everything has to be period. Everything has to, the costumes,
Yeah.
like that was, and he understood. He was a kind of a beginner, and he went away. And then I worked with Robert Rodriguez on a movie.
Planet Terror, yeah.
Planet Terror.
Grindhouse.
And he basically, I was always bugging him, well, what are you doing, this and that. He's a great guy. Great. Him, Quentin, they're just, they live and breathe, movies. They're more fun than Jim. Especially Robert. Robert's just an incredible personality. And so we basically made this movies called Grindhouse, which were about the movies that I used to go to when I was a young kid in the 60s, basically, where you would go to a drive-in theater, and before it even basically got dark, they'd put up a movie. And, it would be Connie Stevens and Vic Morrow or whatever, starring in that first movie, where we had basically come to see Elizabeth Taylor and Paul Newman in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. So they had those double bills, and they had those, I just called them B movies, but I guess in the city they called them Grindhouse movies. So I got it into my head that screw it, because I have a lot of directors that told me I should direct. And I have all the skills to direct, except for I'm not a real visual guy, I don't know when we should be in here. I don't know when we should be wide. I don't know when, And, a lot of people said to me, well, that's the cinematographer's job, let him do that. But I'm kind of a purist, and I said if I was going to do it, I would do it myself. So anyway, I got this terrible script together with this. He didn't have $500,000 anymore. He only had $120,000 now, because it had to do with family and, you know, so on and so forth. And I said, well, okay, well, let's see if we can make this work. So I started rewriting this guy's page 1 rewrite on this script. And at the same time, I did pre-production, which is really not the way that you want to do pre-production. Because pre-production is, you have a script and you say, okay, I'm going to need this car, this wardrobe, you know, like this, everything, you know, like this is what I'm going to need to make the movie. And I wrote the script and we did pre-production in 12 days.
Wait, you wrote the script and did the pre-production in that?
And did the pre-production in 12 days. And so I was writing at night, and basically...
Were you married to Jennifer at the time, or you were? Yeah? Okay, so this really was like
Jennifer
a
was
partnership,
helping. Jennifer was helping.
Yeah.
And she got Daniel Harris involved, and I said to him, I wanted to make an exploitation movie.
Right.
So I said to myself, like, okay, well, what do I need to make an exploitation movie? Sex. That would be the first thing that I would need. So I looked over at my wife, and who's an actress, and
I'm just gonna tell my son over here to plug his ears. Just this is your warning bell. Whoop! There's danger ahead. Anyways, go ahead.
Very beautiful actress, and I asked her if she would do it, you know, because there was going to be some nudity involved. It has to be if you're going to make that kind of movie.
Right.
Nobody's going to go see a, you know.
You gotta give the pundits what they want.
Then I asked her if she had any other friends that would possibly be engaged in that kind of stuff. And she said Daniel Harris. And Daniel was the little girl in Halloween, and she's been in a bunch of those.
Yeah.
And she's like the scream queen, like, you know, whatever. So I said, okay, I've got that. I'm going to do Dirty Cops, you know, and I'm going to do, I got enough money to do a little bit of action. I'll do a little bit of the torture, and I'll just throw in a serial killer.
There you go.
So, I mean, everything I could possibly think of to make a movie that was very exploitation movie. And so we did the 12 days of pre-production and immediately went into a 12-day shoot. The Terminator was an 11-week shoot. Aliens was a 22-week shoot, you know. And I did this in 8 days. And whenever you see a cabin in the woods, you usually know you're probably watching a low-budget movie. So I paid myself $60,000 to star in it, and to direct it, and to write it, and to produce it. And I gave Jen, because in the Screen Actors Guild, the amount of money you make for your health care is important. So I gave Jen like $7,000. I gave the other guy that brought me the money $7,000. He acted. He played the bad guy in it. He wanted to be in it, obviously. And I think that was it. So I really made the movie for about like $30,000.
Wow. So you must have, I mean, James came, I'm thinking when you're talking about short production schedules, the great Roger Corman made Little Shop of Horrors in 2 days. He made other movies while they were tearing down sets from another movie he just shot. He said, we got Boris Karloff for a couple days, make another movie. And but James Cameron came from Roger Corman's world. He worked with Roger. So you must have learned something about cutting costs from, I mean, was James a frugal producer, director? Was he like, did he...
Yes.
He stretched a dime into a dollar, yeah?
Yes.
And did you learn any of that from him? I mean, you must have learned this from a lot of directors.
You know, I have worked with a very, very, very talented director by the name of Billy Friedkin. Billy Friedkin directed what I think is the greatest horror movie ever made, which is The Exorcist. And he also directed...
Rampage.
Well, he directed Rampage, but he also directed the movie in San Francisco.
French Connection.
What?
French Connection, right?
What?
The French Connection?
French Connection, right. It's got the best car chase
Greatest.
in the history of films in it. Some people think the car chasing Bullet is as good, but
slower.
He's not even chasing another car. He's chasing a train, you know, and he's trying to get to the train station. And the stories of Billy Friedkin's just fucking out of his mind when he's on his
Is he really that wild? I mean, I've seen a million interviews where he's completely.
He is really that. He is as wild and as crazy and as intimidating as he can possibly be. Off the set, he's like, "Hey, Michael, what's
Yeah.
How do you think it went today?" You know? I mean, and that's what Arnold has said about Jim. I've never seen any behavior from Jim other than the worst I ever got from Jim is maybe in Aliens or something. I was just like, you know, do a shot and have him come up and say, "That's exactly how I don't want it." I said, "Well, Jim, we all know you can do everybody's job on this set better than them, but you can't play Hicks. So give me a line reading," which actors don't like when you say it like this, you know. "Give me a line reading and let's move on." And we did, and you know, I see Jim all the time now.
Okay, cool.
Work out with him, and you know, we have a very close friendship. And then we lost Bill. Bill introduced me.
I was going to ask you about Bill Paxton, one of the great actors of all time. Huh? From Weird Science on up, I mean, just one of the greats. And again, seemed like a hell of a nice man. I've loved him since I was a kid.
People always ask me who my favorite actor to work with was, and it was Bill Paxton. And energy galore, funny, but you know, he wanted to make good movies.
Yeah.
Also made his own movies.
Yeah, Frailty, a great movie. Bill Paxton directed.
Very good, low-budget movie.
Yeah.
And so he introduced me to Jim, and I introduced him to a guy that used to kind of coach me when I was very young as an actor, named Vince Chase, who is named after that group that did that series. Remember, Vince Chase was the star of that.
You got me there.
Okay. What? Entourage, yeah. And then they used Vince's name for that. And because Bill had worked with Mark Wahlberg on a movie called Travelers that people aren't that aware of. Vince died the day before yesterday. And he was the godfather of 4 of my children.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Michael.
Yeah, but you know, we all have to die sometime, and and everything dies, and you know, this planet's going to die. So, you know, that's the way I look at it.
Well, I mean, it's still a shock to lose Bill because he was young. He seemed hale and hearty. It kind of turned into.
There's a suit now because of some malpractice, basically. So basically his family sued Cedars-Sinai. Cedars-Sinai has come back and said it wasn't their fault. I mean, a lot of people die on the operating table, but this was a real shit show.
We'll turn it to you guys in a minute because I'm sure you're burning with questions. I was just talking to Ice-T, of all people, the other day, who said the same thing because he was in Trespass, the Walter Hill movie with Bill. And he said it's his favorite human being ever. And he used to, Ice-T, Body Count, the heavy metal. He said Bill Paxton would come to the shows and be crowd surfing out there and everything. It was just like, he loved life, right?
So much energy, so full of life, so creative, so fun, so physical, so, you know, there's just nobody like him. There's just nobody like him. You know, you walk into he was a little bit, my coach was able to, Vince was able to, like, I first met him on a movie called Lords of Discipline, which was the first black cadet in the South at a military school, at the Citadel. And
is that with David Keith was in that too? Yeah. A lot of people came out of that movie.
And Rick Rossovich. And I mean, Bill is one of those guys that you have to really like, you know, if you're a director, you have to go, slow down, Bill, you know, just lower it down a little bit.
Stop your grinning and drop your linen.
But he worked with Vince throughout the years, and he got to a point where he was, you know, extraordinarily good. Even before he did his series, he did One False Move, and, you know, directed his movie, and he did that one with Billy Bob Thornton where their airplane crashed.
Yeah.
So
he's great in Near Dark, another Gale Ann Hurd movie, right?
No.
Isn't that? Oh, no,
was,
that's Catherine Bigelow. Yeah, I'm thinking the James Cameron connection.
Yeah. Never made any sense to me.
Yeah.
I got off of that, and I was like, I didn't know who Catherine was.
Yeah, all the Aliens guys are in it except you.
Academy Awards.
Yeah.
And I just never made any sense to me. It
Yeah.
still doesn't when I watch it. Catherine's gone on to win
She sure has.
a couple Academy Awards, so what do I know?
What do we know? Yeah. Questions for this man over here? Yes, sir. Oh, sorry, dude. I didn't even notice this thing. Just hands up is better. Yeah. Tech Noir.
Shootout at the
The
club?
shootout at that. What went on, and what do you mean? Just some stories about the shootout? Any tales to tell?
Well, that was a very fun night, you know, and you know, because we had all the extras, and that was not usual for our film. It was a low-budget film, and extras are 50 a night, you know, so you get 50 of them, and it's and again, too, I never really worked with Arnold. I didn't really work with him. There are a couple of, there's a stunt in that sequence that I don't do. And I've learned throughout the years that you do stunts, and half the time they can't even tell it's you. So, you know, but when I come in, I think I suggested to Jim to have some people in front of me. And I, you know, push them away, and then I start hitting him with the shotgun. And then I go to the side. I do this fabulous roll, and which I did do, which was a stunt. And you can't even look at the movie. It's like that. You can't even see it. But jumping over the bar, like when I jumped over the bar, that was not me. And that was not me. I'll tell you a couple interesting things about Jim Cameron and why he's so brilliant. And here's a 28-year-old filmmaker, and he, you know, there is a scene in the Terminator. I say, what's it like to work with Arnold? I don't know if I never really worked with him. You know, we never talked. He was exactly like you thought he would be, loud and about the cigars and the practical jokes and the grabbing the women on it, you know, I mean, just you know, he was exactly what you thought he would be. And he was nice to me, and he was a, you know, wonderful guy. And, you know, Bill Burr is a comedian that, if you listen to his comic routine on him, it's unbelievable to see this guy that comes over from Austria and, you know, ends up, you know, being a weightlifter. Bill Burr's a comedian, goes, I lifted weights, I didn't get famous, you know. And then he goes, you know, I'm going to be governor of a state I can't pronounce. Then I'm going to marry a Kennedy. And Bill Burr's like, no, you're not going to do it, you know. And but so everybody underestimated him, and but I'll tell you a couple of quick little things about Jim. One is that when I'm jumping out of the store where I put on those Keds, and I kind of get the shirt or whatever, and they cut to me putting on the Keds. You can see me leave that, and I go down a fire escape, and from about 12 feet, I jump, hit the ground, and run behind the police car, and then go around the police car, and I grab the shotgun off the police car. Well, when they said action on that movie, I was sitting behind the police car with a gun in my hand, with a shotgun in hand. And it was the stunt guy who went down the, deal and made that jump. One of the hardest stunts I've ever seen too was the same stunt guy. I'd say that he was about at least as high as this table. I would probably say even higher, like this. Jim wanted a real wide shot of me coming into Earth, you know. And this stunt guy gets on a table naked. We were downtown LA. And, you know, on action, basically just jumps off sideways. And if you watch that movie, you know, the cement doesn't move at all, but his body kind of shuffles. And another story that which is, I think, to this day, the hardest stunt I have ever seen. I mean, it was brutal. I mean, you can just imagine. I mean, he was probably up here like this, and Jim was not on this very low camera, so he didn't want to be able to see, you know, where he came from. He was probably up here. He got up and walked away, but I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And but I'll tell you another thing about Jim and how smart he was at that time. And when you're working with him, you start picking up on this stuff. But there's one scene, I think, that I'm in the same frame as Arnold. And that's when Arnold busts through the window of the car, grabs Linda, and I'm like fighting him off, you know. And basically, that was a very, very difficult shot to set up because he had to be on top of the car. The car had to be kind of racing backwards. And then he had to hit that window, which stunt guys have, like these little things that they hit, which breaks the windows for him. So that's always kind of like, it's going to look just right, you know. And so, and this is like a 2-hour setup, you know. And so busts his hands through there. And, you know, Jim just thought it was dangerous, you know, going that fast and everything. So what Jim did was he took something like this, just like this, all right? And he painted it like the building that was next door. And he had it from here all the way down to there, all the way down to there, and it was on rollers. And so when he said action,
they moved that.
He started rolling this thing behind us, so it looked like the car was moving.
Yeah.
The car wasn't moving at all.
That's a pure Roger Corman technique for sure.
This thing back here was moving, and then he punches through and grabs her. We did it in one take, but the idea of like, well, how are we going to do this? Let's make the background move.
It's ingenious, yeah, it's fantastic.
Really just a brilliant guy. I could tell you a lot of stories about how in film he does stuff that is like, you just like, wow, that was a pretty smart thing to do. He had, when we did Aliens, we came out of those things at the beginning of the movie.
Yep.
And supposedly there wasn't enough money to do, you know, like the 8 that were supposed to come out or whatever. Mm-hmm. So he thought about it for a while, and then he took a big mirror, put the mirror up against that. Yeah. So it looked like it was 8.
Oh, wow. It's unbelievable.
Shot all 8.
Yeah, these are all Roger Corman things, man. I think it's great. See?
Right.
Yeah, man.
I'm sure I know the answer to this, and I don't want to read the real answer, but is the new Blomkamp Aliens thing ever going to happen?
Is Neil's movie dead?
Because we need more purple bits.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. Yes.
Here's the thing.
Everybody knows that there was supposed to be another alien movie, and then.
First of all, you should know that Jim Cameron now has the rights back to the Terminator. All right, so they after 2, you know, the third one was the girl, and she was good, but
it was the same movie, yeah, man. Yeah.
The 4th, Aliens versus the Predator. I mean, they had like totally like wiped out that franchise. And then they brought Arnold back, and they thought, oh, it's going to be a big hit. It was out of the theaters in a week. It was gone, and they didn't make any money there. So the French companies sold the rights to a woman. Jim bought the rights back off the woman, and he now owns the Terminator. And he's shooting a movie right now with Linda and Arnold. And I can guarantee you, from now on, any Terminator movie that you go to will be a great movie, like the first 2, because it's Jim Cameron. You know, it's like Steven Spielberg. But even like Steven Spielberg misses sometimes, you know. Even Ridley Scott misses sometimes, you know. Jim, he doesn't miss very often, you know. So, did I answer?
No, you went. You were on the same. That's good to know, but we want to know about the Neil.
Yeah, the Neil
Blomkamp.
Blomkamp thing. What happened was Neil and Sigourney got together on a movie that, funny enough, Neil calls my agent up, and he said, he's in England. He said, "Can Michael put himself down on tape on you know, whatever, your computer or whatever, and you know, kind of play this little scene for me? I want to cast him in this movie. I want to cast him as the bad guy, but you know, I just want to see what he looks like. You know, I haven't seen him in years." So I went into Century City, and there was no casting session or anything like that. There was two guys. One I think might have been a producer, and the other guy was like setting up the thing. So I go in and I do my thing, and I think I do a pretty good job. My son was with me, and I went down, and they were walking, and they didn't realize my son was behind him, and one of them said, "That's exactly what we needed," you know. So I thought I was going to play that part. You know, cut to Sigourney Weaver playing the bad person in Chappie, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And so basically Neil then and Sigourney developed a relationship, not a physical relationship, but one in which they trusted each other and worked together a lot. And they came up with a script. Neil had a script that Sigourney loved. And basically they were going to act like Alien 1 happened, Alien 2 happened, and the rest of them were just, don't think about it.
Yeah. That
never happened, you know. And which is what Jim has done with the Terminator now. So that's basically the you know, what happened was Blomkamp started like putting stuff out on the internet, like shots of me, like my age, and like Newt, like being like, you know, like 26 or whatever, and like Reddit, and I mean everybody's just went crazy over it, you know. So Fox greenlit the film with Ridley Scott being the executive producer. Somewhere along the line, I have a feeling that Ridley Scott and Neil Blomkamp had a conversation that didn't go very well.
Yeah.
Because Ridley, who was doing Prometheus, said he pushed Prometheus, and he said, "Fuck it, I'll do it." So he went out and he made Aliens: The Covenant, which was horrible. You know, I mean, I don't listen. Anytime anybody works that hard, and he's a brilliant director. I don't mean to be, but everybody I've ever, I never saw Aliens. I'll tell you, when I was a young man, and they cut me out of Aliens for no reason, you know, and Newt out of Aliens.
Oh, you mean Alien 3 you're talking about? Alien 3? Is that what you mean?
Alien
Yeah.
Cut me out of Alien 3 before
it's a real bummer.
I thought I was going to be part of this franchise.
Right.
You know, that's where you make the, you know, like, you know, cut me out of the thing. I can remember standing up, going to see a movie in Grauman's Chinese Theater, the big theater. And I didn't realize it, but the trailer for the new Aliens 3 came on. And I swear to God, I stood up and I booed as loudly as I possibly could. Boo! Boo! You know, the other people in the theater probably thought,
who's
like,
this asshole?
But it worked out pretty well for me because they ended up they tried to pull some shenanigans, and they ended up having to pay me just about as much as they paid me for making the movie in the first place, which was like 18 weeks.
And then you didn't have to be part of that piece of shit movie. So hey, it all worked out.
And I
all
look at
worked
it
out.
this way. I'm leading man in the best second build in the best Aliens movie ever made.
There you go. And that's a perfect place to end this because we're getting the hook. Ladies and gentlemen, our time is up. Give it up. You know, stand up if the spirit moves you for Michael Biehn.
Thank you for watching the Convention Junkies coverage of the 2018 Niagara Falls Comic Con. Please like, comment and subscribe to see more, and let us know below what you think of this video. If you would like to help us with future projects, please visit our Patreon page.